Yeah, no, this is super fun. Like little kind of seasonal greeting cards. I don't usually do these. Like I know some people kind of send these out around kind of the holidays and stuff. I used to. I don't really do it anymore. But
Mm.
yeah, this is super fun. So I'm kind of looking forward to this.
Awesome. That's great. Well, yeah, it's just a bit of fun. Where here for a little bit of time, we're going to have a little bit of a play around, and it's that kind of time of year. I think we had Sophie Eleanor on, who came on and did the first version of this, so she's got the beginning of her card happening. She's talking about the muddy, like kind of the muddy area between now and the silly
Yeah,
season and stuff. It's kind of people start going away, things start slowing down, but deadlines are looming. I don't know. It's a very strange time. Um,
it is.
but hey, we've got Dark Hours Co. looking after us in chat. If you are out there in chat land, be great if you want to say hi as well. It's always great to hear from you. Otherwise, we'll kind of sit back and relax, and we'll chat about holidays. And Jeremy's going to pick up this brief, which I should probably explain in case you don't know about it. Basically, we're inviting some artists and designers to come on Adobe Live and create a shareable kind of Christmas. Basically, it's a greeting card for holidays. And so lots of different takes on that. Of course, whatever you celebrate is all good in the hood. But yeah, it's just a bit of fun. That's why we're here.
Yeah, yeah. So look, we're gonna kind of take this into like I did different tack. Obviously, we're gonna do kind of Christmas, but as the kind of the majority of the kind of the world that celebrates Christmas to a certain extent is in the northern hemisphere. So usually, like Christmas is cold, right? Christmas is snow. Santa's wearing all the kind of the winter gear and stuff. And we down here in Australia, where kind of a few other hemisphere countries, we get it in so it's blazing hot. So yeah, so look, we've got some kind of interesting ones. Like this one, the pose is pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
He's obviously a little bit cold. I don't know what he's floating on. Others are like really weird. Like this one's probably one of my favorite like AI prompt results that I've ever gotten from something just like Santa Claus swimming in a pool floating,
It's pretty
and
wild.
he's just becoming his floating device. We've also kind of looked at some kind of Adobe stock stuff. Some of this is AI generated, others is cartoons, so like surfing Santas and stuff. Um, and this is kind of giving me kind of a few ideas of like maybe what the pose could be or what the action could be. So we're gonna take it from there. I'm probably gonna scrap this pool idea because as much as these are kind of worth a little bit of a giggle, they're not going to be super helpful for me. So I'm going to kind of go off of like this like Santa surfing idea, and kind of take it from there.
Nice.
So we've got a canvas here. This is your kind of standard greeting card format. So we've got 125 mils by 175 mils. Um, Usually, kind of Photoshop does slightly funny things to these measurements. I'm not sure why it does that. But yeah, ideally these are kind of like 125 by 175. And that's your kind of standard greeting card format. And now we can just kind of go to town. Now, one of the things that I will do before we kind of start sketching on this, like often what I'll kind of do is have like a bunch of little kind of ideas going on where there's going to be like oh, maybe there's going to be some type up here and like a jolly Santa down here with his beard, and maybe he's got some sunnies on. Like I'll do a bunch of little kind of sketches like this, all around the kind of the page, maybe kind of like a Christmas wreath, but it's made of like barbecued prawns and sausages and all kind of things like Aussie barbecue.
Mm.
So that'll be kind of like a longer process kind of sketch vibe. For this one, I'm just going to get stuck in straight to this idea of kind of the surfing Santa, and we'll take it from there. But because I've got this kind of because ideally this would get printed, and I want to kind of stay away from the edge and kind of work to my illustration, it can be really handy to give yourself a little bit of a kind of a frame to work in. What this does is a little bit of a kind of a weird thing whereby I usually what happens when you get close to the edge of your drawing, if I kind of hide this, is like maybe, I don't know, like maybe you've got like an arm kind of coming out here, right? So you've got a kind of an arm extending out, and there's like a hand at the end, and it's like you're getting to the edge here, and it's like, all right, well, let me just kind of fit the edge, like just
Right.
squeeze that in a little bit because it's getting to the edge. And that kind of doesn't really serve your results. So this kind of frame here will serve as a kind of like a fake safety edge, whereby I'm going to work as if this was the edge of the paper. But if I get here and I'm kind of running out a little bit of space, I still have some space. So it's a little bit of just kind of a safety buffer zone
cool.
that's like trick my mind into thinking like this is all you got to work with, when actually there's a little bit more.
Yeah.
And it's something that you'll see quite a few people kind of doing in that way. And I'm just going to start pretty small here and kind of just see where we land. So I'm going to start out with this kind of like big kind of belly, maybe kind of top of the torso, a little bit of a head. We get some arms going. And again, I'm not really kind of too fussed here about kind of getting the details and the proportions right. We're just kind of trying to get a sense of like what could the composition be and kind of how would this all look, right? So already there's a little bit of a kind of an idea of what this is going to do. For you guys looking at this, it might be like, what is going on in this drawing? It doesn't make sense. What was that he just drew? It makes sense to me because it's in my head and I'm the one doing it, but hopefully all this kind of make a little bit more sense once it's actually drawn properly on the page. But yeah, that's not too bad. Like I've got a good idea of kind of like a Santa running towards the sand or towards the water.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of a kind of a sun going on. So working at a smaller size just means you're not going to get caught up in the details of like, before you've figured out like all this section, you're going to start kind of drawing this hand in like full detail and trying to get all the knuckles in and everything. It's like, yeah, you're not there yet. You still need to kind of resolve the rest of your sketch before that happens. So small means like you get a good bird's eye view on the whole thing, and then you can kind of get a better understanding of how that's looking. It also means kind of better dynamism of the pose, like you're going to get more exaggeration.
Nice.
So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger now that I'm kind of relatively happy with this. And again, like you're getting the kind of the sped up version of this. Normally I kind of spend a little bit more time kind of riffing on this. And already you can kind of see how that little border has like helped me out here, like where this little kind of hat kind of falling off his head as he's kind of running fast, like that's kind of going outside of my fake frame, but it's still well within the comfort zone of my printed actual real life frame. So it's going to be pretty handy for me to use that. Once that's done, I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to call this one sketch. And now I'm going to start getting in a little bit more detail in on the basis of this. So I probably have a fair bit of change happening in here. And again, just working with these kind of basic shapes. I'm keeping things pretty simple. Always helps also to kind of give things a little bit of a sense of an angle to kind of, especially on things like spheres and cylinders, like which way is this angled? Is it looking up? Like if you were drawing a face, for instance, like putting the eyes on here immediately kind of gives you this sense of like that head's looking up, flipping it over. So drawing those kind of like construction lines means that like when I put in the seam of like the waistband of the swim shorts that he's going to be wearing, I kind of have a better like idea of where that's going to go. So it's going to stick right there. And then he'll have a little bit of a kind of a chest shape in there. And that's going to come over here and go into his shoulder and arm. So again, I'm not going to be too worried about like getting this to be like anatomically correct. This is a cartoon. It just needs to be super expressive. Like I could even just leave the arm like that if I wanted to. That'd be totally fine for something like this. I am going to kind of do a little bit more detail than that, but just to kind of show you guys just how graphic this really could get. So let's make him a little bit kind of like burly.
Yeah, well, he's a surfer, right? So he's top heavy.
Yeah, but also he's Santa. You know, he's had a few Christmas puddings.
It's like a Obelix from Asterix and Obelix.
Yeah, Obelix. Yeah. Give him.
Is it Obelix?
Obelix. Yeah.
Obelix. It's funny because like I read it when I was a kid a lot. You know, it's shocking that I say asterisk correctly because you know in your head, especially because it's what supposed to be goal, right? Like,
Yeah,
is it French?
It's French. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, technically, it's probably Belgian actually. Like Tintin.
Right.
All those guys like Belgium back in those days. Big kind of cartoon strip. Like so our like the comics in Europe at the time were not called like comics. They were called something a little bit different, which doesn't really translate into into English. But they were basically just kind of like comic strip would be the best kind of thing to equate that to.
Right.
And a lot of those came out of like Belgium or France. But yeah, a lot of those names, all the main kind of characters' names end in ix because it's like it's a Gallic thing.
Right.
Kind of do. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny that we were talking about with Sophie when Sophie was on. She's like, "Oh, did you ever read Mad Magazine? Do you know what that?" And I was like, I read probably every single one. I don't know why. Like, and I completely had forgotten about it. Like it was a blank spot in my mind. I was like, yeah, I did read a lot of comics. I read Archie and Jughead and Asterix and Obelix and like Mad magazines and stuff like that. And I was like, what happened? Where did that go in my mind? I completely forgot. I thought the first comic I read was like Marvel when I was in my 30s. Like I don't know where that that came from. That came and went somehow in my mind.
It's a little while ago.
Yeah. Ouch. But yeah.
Hey, look, I can say that.
Yeah, you can. Oh dear. Oh man. Yeah.
Yeah. So just again, like messing around with this sketch, kind of see where like everything's going. As you can see, like I'm not strictly sticking to what I had kind of drawn in the first place, but there's a good kind of guide there of kind of what that might kind of look like or be. I'm not too happy with this back leg here. That's going to be a bit tricky to do, but things like this, for instance, this knee coming up, like how much is he running? Like, is he really kind of stepping it up and the knee's like coming way up, or is it a little bit kind of like a bit more of a strut and he's kind of going in? It's like there's a range of different things I could do at this stage with this sketch, and not be too worried about how that's going to look going in. But yeah, just getting the main kind of construction lines down at this point is what I'm most kind of worried about. And then his foot, probably going to kind of see the underneath of it a little bit. And this is also where I kind of need to kind of think and maybe look at my own feet and just kind of think about where does the big toe is always on the inside. It's going to go here, and then the smaller guys will go on the edge. Like
Right.
So. It's important to get those kind of things right, like what side of the hand is the thumb on and stuff like that, because you can very quickly make something look like, hey, that's not quite right there. By kind of getting those things wrong very easily and very quickly does something kind of start to fall apart like that. This is also probably where, if I was a good boy, I would start looking at some reference for
Right.
his foot. But yeah.
Because you got to get that perspective right at the same time.
Yeah, I'm trying to get this like foot below kind of thing, like that, but also where the kind of the toes are kind of like curled up at the end, like he's kind of running. I should also probably kind of look at some reference of kind of running and just like see where this other foot kind of be good to put. Potentially a bit and just have that other leg come down here and then the foot there. That's not too bad. Aggressiveness. You like anatomically that means one of his legs is really, really long, but it's quite expressive and it doesn't really shock doing this cartoon kind of vibe. Okay, like it needs to be, you know, something that like classical drawing schools are going to study with intent of like learning how muscles work and proportions and all that kind of jazz. So we're all good with this, I think. So I leave that foot kind of coming down there, and then that over to here, it'll rotate around that kind of corner there.
Nice.
I can just kind of move that over just so that then the surfboard comes out on the other side, just about here. And that's just a little bit more kind of like obvious. It's not just kind of blending into the foot at the end there. So it's just a little bit more kind of handy in that way.
Nice.
And then we give him some kind of sunnies. And there we go. And so, so this is pass number 2, right? So I've got like one sketch already on there that you kind of saw me do at the start. And now I'm kind of doing a second kind of round of sketching here to kind of clean it up a little bit. And so what I would kind of normally do is now bringing this into something like a Liquefy kind of tool and see if I can make this even more kind of expressive, right? So let's take this into Liquefy. And here we go. And now I'm going to start messing around with this kind of move tool, or this kind of smudge tool, to see like, just trying to make this a little bit more like either accurate or expressive, to see like just what's kind of better here. Like maybe his shoulders like are right up into his head. That foot's kind of going out a little bit more at the back. Maybe the fist is a bit bigger. Just making these kind of adjustments without having to redraw everything.
Yeah.
This is super handy to kind of get that kind of sense of kind of motion and dynamism in that pose without having to just redo everything in there. And you can, like, if you've done it too much, you can kind of reconstruct it. You've got this slider here, and this will just kind of allow you to just kind of, you know, if you went too far, if you're not too happy with it, but you don't want to undo everything either, there's a kind of a sweet spot where you can just say like, that's too much, but that's too little. This is pretty good. So if we go into the reconstruct, we can just kind of progressively undo what we did and then hit return, and then that'll kind of apply those things to that. And so ideally now what I would do is I would make a third layer again and kind of call this cleanup, drop the opacity down of that one, and then start going to town on like the basic kind of structure of this kind of drawing.
Nice.
And getting those detail in. So let's switch to black line work now, because we're working on something a little bit kind of cleaner, and then we'll switch from this kind of more sketchy brush to something a little bit more inky. And we can go to town. Now, I'm not going to do the whole thing because I want to try and kind of get some other kind of bits and pieces in here, but you'll get kind of what this is going to look like. And we can start getting a little bit more kind of that detail into here based on kind of what we already did, right? Let's give him some kind of more cool, like Pit Viper style sunnies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll give him a little bit of a tuft of hair out the front here. Just, you know, he's not like
It's hanging
completely gone.
It's hanging on for dear life.
Yeah. But yeah, he's got his glorious beard, so that's the main thing.
What were the glasses called? Pit Viper.
Pit Viper, yeah, it's a brand. They're not the only ones that kind of did these 80s kind of, you know, visor style glasses, but they're certainly the ones that did them the best.
Right. I never heard that term before. I recognize the shape straight away, but
All right, so yeah. So again, this is just kind of like inking kind of basic principles here, trying to get that kind of cartoony vibe, maybe some of the texture of the fur in that beanie. Thinking about like where the darker lines are going to be and trying to sort of thicken those outlines up a little bit more.
nice. Looks like a fuzzy hat.
Yeah. We can also start thinking about like, do we add in some kind of like motion kind of speed lines in here, right? So he's like running really fast to get to the water. So do we start kind of adding in those things in there at this stage? Got to be sure you're putting them on the right angle. Otherwise, he looks like he's kind of going to run down into the ground. So maybe they're more kind of that way.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
All right, cool. So again, like this is me for the next like little while trying to sort of, clear up what's going on in this drawing, how much kind of detail do I put in, thinking about things like little add-ons, like, I don't know, maybe he's got on this toe, maybe on this foot, he's got a little crab that's kind of got him.
Little crab that's hanging on.
Yeah.
It's cute.
Maybe he needs more. Crab needs more like Squidward eyes kind of thing, more like a little bit of a SpongeBob kind of vibe.
Yeah, cartoony kind of thing going on.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so you can kind of keep adding, a lot of kind of personality and character to this kind of drawing as we kind of go into it, just adding more and more and more expressiveness into it. But what I kind of wanted to move on to at this stage is that we've just kind of got an illustration in the middle of this page. So I want to make this into a greeting card. I need it to be something that's going to be a little bit more than just that on its own. And so I'm going to swap in some text, right? And I want to try and get this kind of like retro greeting card vibe. So we're going to say season greetings in this kind of scripty typeface. I'm going to bring that up here. And I'm going to add in a second line. Really, what I should be doing is probably doing this in Illustrator so that I don't have to put each one of these on a separate kind of layer and kind of have them be a little bit of a mess. But because we're doing this in Photoshop, that's just going to stay like that. And then we're going to do a little bit of a quick little effect on type. Done. And let's obviously swap fonts for this. Let's bring this up a little bit more, a little bit, not that much more. There we go. And I don't know if I have a good like vintage typeface for this. So I'm probably just going to go to the good old Impact for now. And I'm also going to change. I had this originally, I think it's set to like 50 or something by default on Impact. I'm going to change this down, the tracking of this, as in like the space in between each set space in between all of the characters. I'm going to change it down to 0, maybe even -10, just to kind of condense that down a little bit. And then I'm going to go to transform. So Command T, go to this guy up here. So we're looking at, we're looking at this little kind of
the zoom
window thing.
Lovely.
So we're clicking on that, and it's going to bring up this next window up here. So we need to go into that basically. So we got that one over here, click on that one, and then this one pops up. And then from that, we want to go to this like flag thing, right? And that brings up this menu. Is that the one that I wanted? Or do I want a different one? Is it flag? No, it's rise. Sorry. There we go.
Right.
Whoops. There we go. I zoomed way
Zoomed so far in.
I know, yeah. And now it's zooming out. I think my computer's chugging a little bit. I'm not too sure why. That's probably why the audio is a little bit funny. But now what this will do is it'll allow me to get this kind of like, you know, like that swirly kind of type.
Yeah.
Pretty quickly. And the cool thing about this is that this type is still live, right? So if I unclick that, I can kind of go back in. I can make this a little bit bigger and fit that nicely into there. So season greetings from Sydney. And if I go back into my transform tool and click back on that kind of bent window, that rise tool is still live. So I can keep editing it as much as I want. Also, if I've noticed that I've made a kind of a typo, like I can still change this to
Sadney.
Sadney. So yeah, so it's all still kind of live in that sense.
Yeah, that's cool. Why is it live like that? Like, because traditionally, I guess the horrible way to do it is to rasterize it, right, and then do it or something. But even then, it would pixelate a bit. So yeah, that's interesting.
These set effects, as in like these ones in here that are like predetermined ones, you can do all of those to live, like as in like non-rasterized type.
Right.
But if I was trying to, let's say, like do the same thing to something like this, whoops, sorry. So let's say I'm trying to like put this on an angle. Let me undo that one real quick and bring the bend down to 0. There we go. Let's say I wanted to put this in perspective. I can do this to my type, right? I can put it on an angle, but if I wanted to make one of those corners kind of bend down, I can't do that. So that's not a set transform tool in Photoshop for those kind of type effects. So in order to do that, I need to, and it's going to do this every time I hit escape, it's kind of doing the thing. That I need to rasterize the type for, and then I can bend this to put it in perspective. But that is not like a stock filter. So that requires the program to kind of say like, all right, this is a rasterized typeface. I can do it to it. So that's why this is rasterized. This is non-rasterized, but anything else that you would do wouldn't be.
Right. Got it.
And so, yeah, the one thing I can't do to this for some reason, I was trying this morning, is to kind of put this in 3D in like using my kind of 3D extrusion, but for some reason it won't let me do it. Even if I rasterize this, it still doesn't let me do it. So I'm going to do it the old fashioned way, where I'm going to duplicate this and actually I'm going to change the color on this so you kind of see where we're at. I'm going to change this to like a nice kind of bright orange like that. And I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to take the bottom layer and change that to a black. And then I'm simply just going to move this down a little bit. And we've got the beginning of a 3D effect. And then I say this is the old school way because now I'm going to rasterize this. And I'm going to just come in and literally just paint on top of that and kind of get that 3D effect in there. So again, if I could use the 3D extrude tool, this would do it for me and it would probably do it better. But I couldn't figure out this morning why that wouldn't let me do it. If anybody knows why in chat, I'd love to hear why that is. But yeah, that would be kind of like the way to do this. And again, this is probably one of those things that's smarter to do in Illustrator. Right. Because then I'm also going to do stuff like, you know, ideally, if I had more time, you might start thinking about like, might start thinking about things like, all right, well, let's put some illustrations into this layer here because it's one of those kind of like old school things. So like maybe there's like, like some palm trees in here and like a sunset, and then like I don't know, there's the opera
Oh yeah,
house and like that kind of stuff.
like what would
Uh,
be on like a fridge magnet or something.
yeah,
Yeah.
effectively, yeah. So that would be kind of like a pretty cool thing to do here. But I can do some nice stuff with this type as well, where I'm going to maybe put like a stroke on this and bring the stroke inside of it. And am I on the right one? Yeah, I am on the right one, but I'm using the wrong color and my stroke is enormous. There we go. So just give this a little bit of an
Mm.
inside kind of stroke. And then we can probably rasterize this as well. Rasterize type. And we could potentially continue with this. But what I wanted to show you as well is a cool way to kind of, if you don't necessarily have time or the kind of the drawing skills necessarily required to kind of do that thing where you're putting all these kind of landmarks of the place inside the type, there's a really kind of sweet and easy way you can do something. And it's basically like this. I'm going to put like a halftone effect on my type, and it's going to give me a little bit more kind of texture in this. And our card's starting to come together a little bit. Obviously, if I finish this illustration, added some color into it, we'd be laughing. But I am going to take this type and I'm going to duplicate it. So Command J on my keyboard just takes that layer that I've got selected and duplicates it. I'm going to get rid of this stroke effect on it. And I'm going to put what am I doing? I'm going to put a gradient on top of this.
Right.
So I'm going to select my entire layer here, and I can do this by holding down the Command key, and you can see this little kind of grid comes up. If I hover over the actual thumbnail and click, holding down the Command key, it selects everything in there for me.
Oh yeah, I always forget that shortcut.
It's not like a huge time saver, but it's a nice one if you've got kind of stuff scattered everywhere around your layer and don't want to kind of like magic wand and like click a billion times. It's a good one to kind of do in that way. So I'm going to put a kind of a mask that's going to come on top of this, like a gradient from here to there. And I'm just going to edit that back out a little bit with some of these colors, just making sure that it's kind of looking right all the way through. Now from that, I'm going to go to my filter. And it's important that your gradient goes from like black to white just in grayscale and gets filled in. So I'm going to go to filter, pixelate, color halftone. Again, in Illustrator, you could do this with like 2 clicks and it would be live and it would be a lot faster probably. But we're going to try and kind of do this in Photoshop, and we're going to put a gradient effect on top of that. And that's not too bad. Let's leave it like that. Let's leave it at that. And then I'm going to go in with that kind of layer here and select all the white. So select similar, delete all the white.
Oh, cool.
And it's a little bit dirty. So I'm going to lock my layer. So lock up here, we've got a little kind of checkerboard thing, and that locks my layer, and it puts a little kind of this one, not to be confused with actually locking, which is a filled in padlock.
That's confusing.
That means you can't do anything to your layer. This just means I'm not actually going to do anything to anything that doesn't have pixel information on it. Anything that's transparent won't have anything done to it. And then I can go in and hit my option delete to fill that in black. So I've gotten rid of a lot of the kind of the scrap stuff in there. And then I can put a kind of like a nice red on top of this. So let me go into my color palette here. I'm going to choose a kind of like a nice kind of warm sunsetty red. Like that. I'm going to fill that in there like so. Yeah. And
Nice.
that's our kind of gradient on top of that. But I probably should have done it beneath my actual layer style. So I'm gonna have to do a hack here. Don't pay too much attention to what I'm doing here. This is me not preparing and kind of doing something a little bit silly. But just so that I can bring that kind of outline back on top of it and have a kind of a cleaner outline. So yeah, so these 4 layers that are making this in Illustrator, they could probably just be 1 layer. But
Yeah.
yeah, I kind of like working in Photoshop and kind of working from there. Um, and so yeah, so we're starting to kind of see this kind of coming together. I would probably have to think about some colors. We don't have heaps of time left,
Mm.
but enough to start thinking about potentially like, all right, let's bring in a little bit of a kind of a frame into here, and start thinking about some colors that we could put into there. Maybe some like kind of Christmassy colors. Maybe it's cropped down so things kind of start to expand out of that a little bit more. This is getting into like graphic design a little bit more, maybe.
Yeah.
But effectively, like we're kind of bringing this illustration to life within a framework of a kind of a seasonal greeting card, so that it's not just kind of an illustration on its own and could potentially stand as, like this is a real thing that is a greeting card, and works in that correct way.
Mm. How hot it is in Sydney during Christmas. It's red hot.
It's red hot, yeah. So it's kind of a good thing to have like a little bit of that idea in there, and kind of thinking about like how we can, make this a little bit more kind of interesting, and like thinking about like, all right, let's give him like a bit of sand to run on, and maybe the sand's gonna be super hot too. It is getting really hot, and we got the sand, and then we're gonna flip that, and I'm gonna put a gradient on there. There we go. So when I start kind of putting in some color into this, you'll start to see that kind of coming to life a little bit.
Yeah. Always.
And yeah, we'll leave it there for today. But once that kind of starts to come out, and with the shading and the highlights and everything else, it'll make heaps more sense, and it'll start to come out a lot more clearly in that way.
It's really cool.
But yeah,
the
that's
frame,
the kind of like quick intro.
Yeah, the frame thing works really well for any 3D stuff, like the type on top of the frame, like holding it in there. And I assume you could pop the surfboard out the side as well to give it a bit of a 3D kind of
100%.
bit of depth.
And it's a quick and cheap, easy way to get a little bit of just kind of like volume and depth and dynamism to something that is going to be otherwise quite flat.
Yeah.
So it's something that I tend to play around with quite a bit, of this like things sticking out of the frames that they live in. Yeah, it kind of makes him like pop from the background, right? Because he's literally coming out of the background.
Yeah, exactly. And it looks like he's kind of running towards, something just out of frame that you just can't see. So it gives you that motion as well, which is cool.
Yeah. Very
good. Yeah, awesome. Well, this has been kind of part 2. We're not really calling it part 1 or part 2 of the series, but it's been we're kind of asking some of our best buddies of Adobe Live to come on as we get into this festive season and create some cards that we'll put into a bit of a gallery that'll be shareable as well, which is super cool. As we get a little bit closer to the festive season, yes, believe it or not, as soon as you put away your Halloween decorations, the Christmas ones come out, my friends. So we're no better than anybody else. And then it's New Year's. And it's Thanksgiving as well for our North American friends all in there. Right, so it's a whole nother thing. It's a whole nother thing you guys got to deal with. But hey, listen, it's lots of fun because we get to design cool, fun things with our buddies. So thank you, Jeremy. Thank you so much for joining us on Adobe Live.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And sorry for the little technical hiccups.
Oh, it's all good.
That's how we know we're live.
These things happen. That's how we know we're live. We have to do it occasionally just to kind of keep us on our toes,
Yeah.
so we don't pre-record everything. But hey, it's been great fun. Go and check out Sophie's video as well. She did tackle the same brief using After Effects. We've got some more stuff coming in 2 weeks as well. We've got another 3 or 4 more of these live streams coming with greeting cards. Happy holidays, all that sort of stuff. Jeremy, thanks again for joining us on Adobe Live. Everyone for watching. We'll see you next time on Adobe Live.
Thanks. See ya.